Salman al-Ansari, this doesn't sound like an off-the-cuff remark. This is something that has been thought out in Washington. Your reaction, first of all, to the words of Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think, Francois, there are a lot of accusations, speculations, and allegations against Saudi Arabia, specifically after OPEC Plus recent production cut. But let's put things into perspective. First, no pun intended, oil is not gas, and it will be a profound mistake to conflate the two, and that there is no comparison at all whatsoever between the high prices of gas and the average prices of oil. That's number one. It's the US that wanted to sell LNG gas to Europe with 4 times the price, not Saudi Arabia, nor OPEC, nor OPEC Plus. And President Macron, the French president, hinted about his frustration, personal frustration of the US exploitation of Europe's energy need. This is a fact. And Voltaire actually said it right. Il n'y a pas de vérité moyenne. There are no half-truths. The second thing is the US administration, as we all know, has waged a war against its domestic US oil industry through an executive order. Months afterward, he said, the Biden administration, Biden himself, at a climate conference, he said Saudi Arabia should be punished for its hydrocarbon production and how Saudi Arabia is exacerbating the climate change. And now he is asking us to pump more oil. And you see the double standards here. The third thing, which is very important and hasn't been very well reported by the media, which is the fact that the US administration urged Saudi Arabia to delay the production cut for a month. So that tells us what? It tells us that it has nothing to do about Russia at all whatsoever. It's all about the midterm elections, which means the US Democratic Party wants the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to meddle in the US elections to basically help them out. And that's why I said earlier, the US ship is too big to fail, but too divided to sail.
It is, though, the case, Salman al-Ansari, that we have seen escalation after escalation from Russia, which stands to profit from that oil revenue. It's the escalation after escalation that matters in this case, does it not? And it's not in Saudi Arabia's interest for Russia to be at war with Ukraine, is it?
Not at all. Actually, Saudi Arabia, 2 weeks ago, the US administration itself thanked the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for his personal efforts to mediate between the two Vladimirs, Putin and Zelensky, and managing to release American and European war prisoners. It was just 2 weeks ago. It was a huge step. You can call it symbolic, but at the end of the day, it's actually very important. Specifically, it might activate Saudi Arabia to do more efforts with regards to working to mediate between the two powers, so we don't get into a third world war scenario. And I'm not exaggerating here. It's actually a very possible thing. And Saudi Arabia has actually sided with the UN statement against taking lands by force. So Saudi Arabia has been very clear about its rejection of the Russian step to invade Ukraine. But does that mean Saudi Arabia is going to take sides in this specific conflict, or better for Saudi Arabia to be in a mediation kind of mode so they can actually find a way through which we can actually prevent this from escalating? And Saudi Arabia, at the end of the day, all what they want is stability for the market. And let's not forget, it's not only Saudi Arabia that decided to do the cut of production. And by the way, no exports will be actually cut. It's also only about the production per se. So there's no effect. And even the prices of oil has actually decreased almost 2 to 3% after the decision of the production cut. So we have to think carefully about, as I said earlier, we have to differentiate between gas and oil. And there is something very important. And Adam Smith, the congressman, Adam Smith, he is a Democratic congressman. He was actually urging Biden yesterday to not make any other further mistake with Saudi Arabia. And he's from the Democratic Party.
Well, let me just ask Kedevan Gorjestani, very briefly, Kedevan, about that one point, that how much of this is about domestic politics in the U.S.?
Of course, it's a very big part. It might not be the most public part of the messaging from the White House. They are worried that there is going to be skyrocketing gas price. That is why I would agree with what your guest said about that this is completely political for the Americans.
Salman al-Ansari, what's your reaction when you hear Vladimir Putin saying, we're not isolated, we have partners, we have friends? Does that, again, make OPEC Plus nations complicit in this invasion of Ukraine?
Let me tell you something, Francois, and as you know, I'm a political analyst, independent one. Russia, we have a lot of differences with Russia. Russia is supporting the regime that threatens our existence, which is Iran. Does that mean we have to take a side to be against them in this specific case? Not necessarily, because you can use diplomacy to de-escalate. We don't need to escalate because that's a strategy that doesn't work. Escalate to de-escalate is not going to work. We need to work on de-escalating the issue and to prevent this from going out of control. It's still under control. All what we are seeing is still under control, but
even after the bombing of urban centers that we've seen over the last 3 days?
Look, wars are ugly. Wars are ugly. Wars are bad. And this is unjustifiable at all whatsoever. And Saudi Arabia has voiced its rejection of that as well. But at the same time, we don't want this to escalate. So is the solution for us to be just taking sides and just to try to do some kind of dramatic move in order for us to take sides? It's not in the interest of Saudi Arabia. It's not in the interest of the Arab world, and it's not in the interest of the energy market. And let's be very honest, Saudi Arabia is not a client state. It's not a client state. It's a nation that predates the US, and it's the heart of the Arab and Muslim world. And I think it will be a catastrophic mistake if the US takes any measure against Saudi Arabia. It would be, I would call it the mistake of the century, if the US does something against the interest of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The US-Saudi relations, I'm a big believer in this relationship. It's the cornerstone of global security and economic prosperity. Mike Pompeo himself said that he can't imagine a world where there is no Saudi, where's no Saudi-US relations. So, and as I mentioned, the congressman from the Democratic Party, Adam Smith, and others. So there are people who we can count on in the United States who know the value of this relationship and who actually appreciated us just 2 weeks ago about the move we did with mediating between Russia and Ukraine. Even Zelensky, President Zelensky himself, thanked the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
But if Russia's not isolated, this war could last a long time. We know that Wall Street Journal article that we mentioned at the outset said that U.S. officials had warned their counterparts in Riyadh that public mood is turning against big oil producers, whether it be the Russians or the Saudis. And even if Donald Trump were to win re-election in 2024, it wouldn't be like it was in 2017 when his first foreign visit was to Saudi Arabia. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very clear for everyone right now that using Saudi Arabia as a scapegoat for the Biden administration's failing policies doesn't work anymore. And if the Biden administration wants to lower the cost of oil and gas, they simply should invest more in their refineries and to lower energy taxes and to also to stick to a reasonable long-term plan that can both help their transition to clean energy without harming their American energy consumers. So just using Saudi Arabia and putting it in the center of the talk when it comes to the high energy prices is not going to help anyone. And I think across the aisle in the United States, they know that. But Biden is just trying to use this for midterm election success. But I don't think it's going to even work. And what's they going to do? Are they going to be in a position where they punish more than 23 nations just for the reason that they are trying to regulate the energy market? That's not going to be sensible, and it's not going to be achievable at all whatsoever. And they know that.
Are they going to review those arms sales? Do you think that's going to happen?
That's up to them. It's up to the Americans to do so. And Saudi Arabia has the whole world, and it's a demand and a supply. So weapons just like any other commodity.